So today we're going to be doing one of the most fun parts of building your radio station, and that is designing and building your radio studio using this very cool software which allows you to look around inside your design and see if it all works really well. I'll show you where to get that software. The link will be in the description, and we're going to go through this design and build of your radio studio. So get ready, here we go. In this part of the studio build, we're going to be looking at the main components of the actual room itself. If you look carefully, you'll notice that these walls seem to be a little bit offset. They don't seem to line up. And that is intentional. That's not just my bad design skills. The reason for that is that if you have parallel walls, you'll get the sound bouncing between them, and you get an increase in your echo, and you get what's called a standing wave, where you get a bit of a pinging sound in your room, which you don't want. A lot of that will be reduced when you put in sound damping material, which we'll chat about later. But one of the ways to improve your acoustics in the room is to actually make sure that the walls, even just by a few degrees, are not parallel with each other, but are slightly offset. So you can see this one actually has 5 walls. Part of that is for aesthetics, so it looks a bit nicer, so that when you're outside the studio walking around, you can look inside, which looks very cool, as well as improving the acoustics of the room. Now, the walls themselves can be regular prefab type drywalling, but the important thing is to make sure that you have filled the walls with some sound damping material, some insulation or something like that, just to make sure that the walls are not just thin drywalling, that they're actually thick and contain some sort of sound damping material. The windows of your studio are also very important, even though in this 3D model you can see that there are standard windows that you would find in any office or house. But in fact, these need to be double glazed windows, but not your regular double glazed for weather, but these are to reduce the sound coming from the outside of the studio into the studio, as well as improve the acoustics, just like the walls will be doing by being at a different angle. The windows will help in a similar way to reduce the echo in your room. We're going to be using a different program because this is an architectural program, whereas in this program we can actually do 3D models. And in this program I will show you how to build the window, and this applies to all windows, whether it's for your door or for the main windows of the building, and even to your exterior windows. So we'll be looking at that in just a moment, but right now, looking at the studio itself, as I mentioned, you have to make sure that those walls do not line up parallel with each other. What's also great about this program, which is called Floor Planner, this program allows you to put not just the structure of the room, but all the components inside, so you can see what it will look like and whether you've got your spacing right. So you can see, is there enough space for your guests and for your presenter, and maybe a big screen on the wall there. And if you're going to be putting in extra things like fridges and couches and coffee machines and that sort of thing, it's good to know that it'll fit in comfortably, and this way you can actually go into the studio and have a look around, so you actually get a sense of, does this feel right? Does it look right? Is it the kind of thing that you want to do? And then once you have got this all looking great, switching to the 2-dimensional version, you can actually see the design that you can use to build. So when you are building your studio in your office, you can use these exact dimensions that you've put into your design and use those for the actual construction of the room. So most importantly, for the windows and the doors of the studio, they are going to be double glazed. You can use very thick glass if you're going to be doing very big panes. If you're going to be using spacing in between the windows like this, the windows don't have to be that thick, although the thicker the glass, the safer it is. But if you're going to be doing very big glass pieces, you must make sure that the glass is very thick and reinforced so that it doesn't break if somebody bangs on it. And there's a good chance that people will bang on it because the sound won't go through. So if they are trying to get your attention, they might bang on the window and not understanding that the sound is not going to go through, and so they could end up breaking the window. So be sure to be careful that these windows are not thin, cheap glass. You can also use perspex and that sort of thing, where it's not something that will shatter, although materials like perspex can get scratched more easily and is not as practical or as nice looking as the glass. But like I say, safety is important, so make sure you don't put in flimsy, cheap glass in there. So use either reinforced or thick glass, or use some Perspex plastics. The door itself can also have a window put into it, which I'll also show you in this other 3D program. Where you place the door in the studio is also important. Mostly what I found is that studios work well to have the door on the opposite side of the presenter. So if you have your main DJ or radio presenter sitting this side, they should be able to see the door. If you look in this design as well, same idea is that if the presenter was sitting there, the door is over here. So they can see people coming into the studio, so they won't be surprised if they're busy doing something and someone walks into the studio. The nice thing about doing this as well is that the guests can be seen from the side like this, but they are not having people staring at them, because often what can happen is that the guests can feel a bit nervous if people were looking, if this, for example, this is the window outside the building. If people were staring through here at the guests can often get a little bit nervous and will not do so well in the interview. But having it on the side, and even here where it's slightly behind the guests' heads, they won't see people staring at them, so it can often make them feel a little better. So this design, whether you're going to be doing it like this, where you've got a very big studio, very wide, with a lot of couches and a lot of stuff going on here, or if you've got a slightly smaller studio like this, the same principle applies, where you've got the main presenter who is facing the door, and then you can have your newsreader or sports or traffic presenter sitting on the side, and then you've got your guests over here. You can also use that space or this chair for a guest as well if you've got, for example, a band of 3 people. What I do advise though is to build this studio desk on the one side closer to the wall, and you'll actually be putting things here to make sure that people cannot walk this way. You can put a rack of equipment here, you can put a, whatever you want there, as long as people cannot walk this way, because you're going to be running cables this way up the walls to the speakers and to the on-air light and all that sort of thing. So you want one side where people cannot walk. So if people are going to go into the studio, they will need to walk around this side, so the presenter and even mostly the guests will only come in this part of the studio. They won't be walking around, but just for safety's sake, because you're going to be running cables, they cannot go that way. So if anybody is going to come around this side, they're going to be coming around through here where there are no cables or any obstructions and that sort of thing. An important tip about the door, when you build it, the door is going to be a double door. So the windows themselves can be double glazed, but there will be 2 doors as well. The one door will swing inwards and the other will swing outwards. So you'll have this door swinging this way, and you can have it hinged on that side with the other door to swing in that way, or they can be hinged on the same side. Whichever way you do it, what you must make sure that you don't do is create a bottom of the frame. Because what a lot of people are tempted to do is to build a frame and then to put a door on either side of that frame. The problem is when that door opens, there's a bottom piece here, which people every single time, I guarantee, no matter who they are, how many times they've been in the studio, they will trip on that part of the door. So you don't want that. For safety's sake, make sure that when you build your frame, it only has the sides and the top parts, not the bottom part of the frame. Okay, so let's look at the construction of the actual window. Okay, so this is a very simplistic 3D design, but it's to show you the idea of how the window is constructed, how you put the glass in, and how it keeps it all in place. But first, to explain to you what's really important is why you do this, because you would assume, of course, having the 2 windows does reduce sound, but what's really important is the angle between the 2 windows. As you can see, they are not, neither of them are up vertically. They are angled slightly. The angle you can, whatever suits you best. It doesn't have to be an exact angle, but as long as they are not parallel with each other and are not vertical. So you need them to be angled. To do that, the window sill or window frame, which as you can see, there is a top and a bottom, which is just your regular dry walling that's going to hold the wall together. But this part, which is actually going to slide in here, so this is just sticking out, but it'll be sitting inside here in the base of the window, this is what will hold your glass or your perspex in place. So you're going to build this kind of frame where the glass will slot in here, and you can see the top and the bottom are slightly different. The top one, the slots are closer together, as you can see there, but the bottom one, they're wider apart so that you can make this kind of V, triangle, pyramid kind of look. And of course here you can put either silicone glue to seal it up, or you can use some rubber material to just give it so that it's not lying hard against the wood, because firstly you'll get sound coming through that, and also it can rattle. You don't want that if somebody does bang on the window that it rattles and then the sound will travel through the actual wall. So you do need to absorb any sound that does hit the window. So by putting in some, like I say, silicone to seal it up, or some rubber material along the bottom and the sides, so just give it like a seat that the glass can sit in. So as I said, this entire thing will slip inside the window so that it is sitting there. Let me just try and move this while I'm speaking to you. And so the entire thing, but this would all be built as one piece. I'm just moving it in like this because I've built it as separate pieces in this program. But obviously that would be one piece that is all glued together and what have you, so that you have got a base for the glass. Now you have to do a lot of very accurate measuring, because the glass has to fit in. When you measure it, if you measure it as a vertical window, the window is going to be too short because it needs slightly more when it leans. So make sure that you get that measurement right, and then when you place the window inside that frame, you'll see, if I move in here, that the glass will be sitting in that groove that you've built there. So what you can do is you can build the wall and the center part and that space part. You can build this all together and then leave these strips on the outside. You can leave those off so that when you put the glass in, that can seal it up. You can do that either, you know, having the bottom one already glued in and then use the top one as the one that you can open and close to put the window in, or you can have both the top and the bottom one missing, so that once the glass is in, then you can put in the strip on the edge here on the bottom and the top as well. You can also put some material here on this surface to absorb some sound. You can put some carpeting or whatever material you want there, because you do want the sound to disappear inside here. Now, the reason why this not only keeps the sound out of the studio but also improves the acoustics is because of the angle, specifically of the one on the inside. This being the outside of the studio, if this is the walkway or the office area, and this being inside the studio, you need this one specifically to be at an angle. Now, of course, you want both of them to be at an angle, but this one definitely has to, because this will help with, like we saw earlier, with having the sound not bouncing between the walls. Because it is angled upwards, you'll get the sound wherever it hits will bounce upwards, so it will reduce the amount of standing waves and echo in the room. So this design of the window will be used, like you can see in this case, where it's an actual wall window, but it also gets done exactly the same when it comes to the door. Now, the door will be a lot more narrow than the window, because you're going to have two doors and a spacing in between. So the door, compared to the actual drywalling, will be much, much thinner. So the spacing between the windows will be a lot closer. So you have to be more careful, but the exact same principle applies, is that the base of the window needs to be further apart than the top. It can be a matter of, you know, millimeters or fractions of an inch, as long as those windows are not perfectly vertical and are not parallel with each other. So now, looking at the two doors, as I mentioned, there will not only be glass in there that are back to back, the doors themselves are back to back. So when they close, you've got a double door, which is going to help keep the sound out from the outside coming into the studio, with the same idea of the tilted windows helping reduce the acoustics as well. If we look here, you can see in this case, the doors are hinged on opposite sides, but you can have them on the same side as well. What people have found is that if you do have a handle on the door here, that if they are on opposite hinges, then they are less likely to bash into each other, so that the hinge of this door will be here and the hinge on that door will be on that side. But either way, what you're going to have is these doors closing, that they are back to back and form a nice seal for the acoustics. In this case, it's not actually hinged properly in the program. I've just basically put them in there. But you'll see the idea is to have the two doors back to back there, and that way you cut out the sound just like the windows would do. In this studio design, as you can see, the windows are absolutely massive. So sometimes having smaller windows can be better. And in this case, even though in this image there are regular office windows, which you could do something similar with, or you can have a single pane of glass as in the other design, even though these are smaller windows. But generally having them slightly smaller will be easier to handle, easier to build, and also cheaper to replace if somebody does break something. But as I mentioned, the bigger the window, the more aesthetically pleasing it is, and the more you can see into the studio. Now, keeping in mind that apart from the studio being acoustically important for the radio station, when you bring in guests and sponsors and advertisers and that sort of thing, they often are impressed by the design of your studio. So even though you may think you could do this in any way you like, you could do it in a bedroom, you could however you like. The problem is that when you want people to be impressed, like sponsors and advertisers and so on, you do need to have a studio that looks very, very cool, and the windows definitely help to do that. The design also makes it look cooler as well than having just a rectangle or a square room. So having a slightly different design, and importantly having the offset walls for the acoustics, this design does look a lot cooler than just having a square or rectangular room. Next, we have to look at the actual sound damping, which we're going to be looking at in the next video, and this will be coming from a range of things like the carpets on the floor, materials on the walls, and that will all be in the next video. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that one. And we'll also be doing a video on the wiring and the actual setup of the equipment in the studio. To jump in here quickly, I'd like to chat about these two programs that I'm using for this studio build design. Firstly, this one called Floor Planner, and as I mentioned, the link is in the description. For now, I'm not getting any money for mentioning this, although I do hope to organize something with them. But if not, either way, use the link. I would recommend it whether they are paying me or not, because this is a very, very cool piece of software. It is completely free. There are some limitations, which I'll explain to you right now, but for your designing of the studio, this is almost everything you would need. There are some little costs if you want to increase the quality of the photograph and what have you that you have at the end, which I'll explain in a moment. But overall, this design of the studio, firstly, let me explain to you that everything in here was already included in the free program. That included the microphone stands, the computer, the big screen TV and what have you, the fridge, everything you see in this studio, the walls and all, the carpets, the couches, everything was included in this program. And if you look over here, you can see that there are different cameras that you can use to show different angles so that you can walk around inside the studio. As you can see, in this case, outside the windows is some grassy area with some sky, but you can change that to be an office area and so on. But the idea is that you can be inside the studio and have a look around, so you get the sense of, does this feel right? And like I said, with the main camera, you can switch between two-dimensional, which is here, where you can have the actual measurements, and you can also print this out and use this as part of your documentation. Or in the case of having the 3D, you can print out a photograph of this. You can even do a walkthrough. Even though I'm just scrolling with the mouse, there is a part that will cost you a little bit more, where you can actually let people do virtual tours where they can walk around inside the studio. So if you have, for example, people you need to impress to fund your project, maybe your college or university or school are going to be paying for this and they need to be convinced of what you are doing, this program will really, really help. You can use it simply to print out on your documents. As you can see here, you can print the 2D and 3D versions. This only comes out, in the free version, comes out as a standard definition, which is reasonably small. It's still fine for example, printed documents. You could use it as a small picture to show when you're submitting your documentation, but to really impress, you do want to go for some of the bigger resolutions of the pictures. Now you'll see that there is a cost. In this case, they work in tokens, and in this case, for example, to go to an HD picture is 5 tokens, and 10 tokens for 4K, 8K, 20 tokens. Now this doesn't work exactly out to dollars or pounds or whatever your currency is. It is slightly different. So for example, getting 5 credits will cost you about $7 or thereabouts. So you have to just check, and that obviously can change. So the cost of the actual credits can change over time, so be sure to check that. But when you decide that you want to have a high quality picture that you need to impress the person who's going to be paying for the studio build, or even impress, people who are just, you want them to rally behind what you are doing, you can create much higher quality images by paying a little bit extra. And but like say, the actual program, what I've done here, as you're seeing here, this is completely free. All the components in it, the ability to look around it like this and to print out a standard definition image is completely free. One of the limitations though is that you can only build one floor or one room. In this case, I'm only building it as one room because I just want to demonstrate and build and design the studio. But you can build an entire floor of your radio station, which will include all the office area, the reception area, all that sort of thing. You could build into an entire floor, but you are limited to only one floor. Whereas if you sign up for the monthly subscription, or if you pay in credits here and there, you can change it to a multi-floored building, which is unlikely that you're going to be wanting a free program when you're going to be doing something on that level. Really, the cost is not that high. So if you're at the point where you want to build an entire building to show, then buy into or at least sign up to their program, which is not that expensive at all. So as you can see here, this is the first floor and you need to upgrade to get more floors. But for now, you have that single floor. In the free version of this program, you are also limited to one project, so you can only build your one studio. But if you're at the point where you're building multiple studios for different people, then I'm pretty sure you can afford to sign up with their monthly program or pay a little bit extra to be able to do multiple projects. Now, when you look at this project in this project folder, you can actually look at the products that are in this project. So these are all the items that I used in this specific project. So you can see the fridges, the computers, and there you can see is the microphone, boom stand, what have you. These are all the items that I used in this project. But there is a very long list of really decent, high quality products that you can choose from, which I'll go and show you now. These are the ones that I used in my project, but you can choose from a wide range of furniture and items. So let me go and show you that. So when you're in your project like this, in the 2-dimensional version, you can see that there are all sorts of icons this side, and you can see there are objects. Now you can choose from a range of living room furniture and so on. You can see here, if you're designing, for example, a house, there is just an amazing amount of furniture that you can choose from, looking at just armchairs, footstools, and so on. And if you go back here, you can see that, for example, if you go to electrical, this is where you can find the TVs, the computers, the microphone stands, all of it is in here. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And this is all part of your free version. So as you can see here, there is the microphone. So you can simply take the microphone and plop it somewhere. And now if we go into the 3D version, you can see there is the additional microphone that I've put there. So you can then move that microphone around. Say if you wanted it here, you can rotate it to be at a different angle. You can increase the height or drop it down, and you can get it to fit nicely so that you've got your item placed into your studio. And you can see, as easy as that, you can design your entire studio, putting in the microphones, the computers, and even doing the structure of the room, all in this one program that is completely free. This is absolutely amazing. The fact that you can go into the studio like this and it builds really quickly. When I tried to build this with some 3D graphics programs, it took forever. For example, to build this took a couple of days, and it's very, very simplistic. It's a great program if you are good at doing 3D design and you specifically want to do 3D graphics and create 3D products and 3D items, then this kind of program is great. But for building your studio where you don't want to actually be making the table and making the chair and what have you. In this case, you actually can just drag and drop and be able to walk inside your studio and be able to sit in the chair and be able to look around and see what your studio would look like from the inside. So I highly recommend that you go and check this out. It's Floor Planner. Click the link in the description, and like I said, it gives you everything for designing the room as well as looking at what it looks like inside. Click on this link for the next video in your studio design once that is ready, and click on this video if you'd like to know more about radio broadcasting.